I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
That plan and to deliver food and other items across Gaza is grossly inadequate to meet the immediate needs of over 2 million people.
Aid trickles into Gaza for the first time in months. But the UN raises concerns about how much is getting in and where it's going.
Half of the world's population is under 30, and we're seeing young people leading at many levels of the society,
Looking toward the future, a conversation with the UN's Assistant Secretary General of Youth Affairs. Making changes with biodiversity in mind. How some landowners are reaping the benefits of working in harmony with nature. Next.
Israeli forces launched a new offensive in Gaza that is expected to include extensive operations on the ground. Humanitarians are concerned about the impact for civilians in Gaza who've been facing dire conditions amid a nearly 3-month Israeli blockade of food and supplies. Israel has started allowing limited aid into the Palestinian territory. The UN says it is trying to navigate Israeli requirements to distribute that aid, but so far it has been a slow process. And UN officials say the amount of aid is nowhere near enough to address the need. Here's Antoine Renard from the World Food Programme.
WFP is doing everything possible to get the necessary permissions and clearances to bring in at least 100 trucks a day with emergency food and other aid in the coming days. This can only happen if we have immediate access and safe delivery guaranteed. But even at that level, we would only be meeting about the very minimum of the population's food needs for the month.
Judeja is monitoring developments inside the UN and has more on our top story. Deja.
Yes, Elaine. It's been a busy week, both here at the UN headquarters and out in the field. But let's start with what's happening on the ground. After months under embargo, Israel has finally allowed what it calls minimal humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. So far, the UN has gained only limited access. Over 100 trucks carrying aid have entered. But due to the lengthy distribution process and an ongoing intensifying military operation, much of the aid has yet to reach civilians. The UN continues to stress that this amount of aid is merely a drop in the ocean.
The Israelis will know our trucks, they know our movements. We continue in a attempt to deconflict whatever movements that will be allowed.
This is what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a video. We must not reach a situation of famine, both from a practical and a diplomatic standpoint, which means that probably the Israeli government knows that what the report from UN last week is right, that the Gaza is facing a famine. What I want to ask is, they said it's a minimal humanitarian aid. Do you think for UN this minimal bar is reached? Like, does UN agree with this minimal
Well, I mean,
bar?
we agree that it's minuscule, that it's minimal, whatever other M word you want to use. It's clearly not enough.
Now to the Security Council. This was a big week. Greece, holding the presidency, hosted 2 signature events. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis personally presided over an open debate on maritime security. Here's what the Secretary General of the United Nations had to say.
Respect for international law is the anchor of maritime security. The international legal regime for maritime security, with the UN Charter and the Convention on the Law of the Sea at its core, strikes a careful balance between state sovereign rights, jurisdictions and freedoms, and their duties and obligations. And it provides a strong cooperative framework for addressing crimes at sea and ensuring accountability. However, this framework is only as strong as states' commitments to to full and effective implementation. All states must live up to their obligations, and they must resolve any differences in relation to maritime security in accordance with the UN Charter.
Meanwhile, it's also been a week rich in cultural events here at the UN headquarters. Prime Minister Mitsotakis inaugurated the Thalata exhibition, Thalata meaning sea in Greek, with beautiful paintings from the National Gallery on display. And that wasn't the only celebration. For International Tea Day, the Chinese mission in partnership with Mali Po County held an event showcasing how tea farming helped lift the region out of poverty. Also this week, the UN Postal Administration and the Palace Museum jointly commemorated both International Museum Day and the 100th anniversary of the Palace Museum, issuing a special New York event sheet. What did the guests write on the first day covers?
Congratulations on the 100th anniversary.
In the prime of youth, ever renewing like the sun and the moon, in harmony and mutual beauty thriving without end.
Supreme harmony pervades everything.
And in the Palace Museum's special promo video, 100 Seconds for 100 Years, guess who did the voiceover? From dawn bell to dust drum, 605 years, the Forbidden City has preserved the memories of history. And that's all from me, Elaine.
Shudeja, thanks. Syria's new government is making strides towards rebuilding the country after 14 years of conflict. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have paid off the country's debt to the World Bank, which could allow Syria to take out new loans. There are still numerous challenges to overcome in the country, but Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Peterson, is applauding decisions by the US, UK, and EU to lift or reduce sanctions.
These are indeed historic developments. They hold major potential to improve living conditions across the country and to support the Syrian political transition. And they give the Syrian people a chance to grapple with the legacy of misrule, conflict, abuses, and poverty from which they are trying to emerge.
This year marks the UN's 80th anniversary. The Secretary General has laid out a plan for major reforms designed to make the organization more effective and fit to face the challenges of the current world.
Progress is too slow in the fight against poverty, hunger, inequality, the climate crisis, decaying infrastructure, and under-resourced education, health, and social protection systems. We must never forget that the development emergency is, at its root, a human emergency.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
Let's not understate what you have achieved. You have made the world a safer place.
After 3 years of negotiations, the WHO's Director General applauded the adoption of a new pandemic preparedness plan. It's designed to help ensure drugs and vaccines will be globally accessible during future pandemics. UNICEF has rolled out mobile clinics to help those displaced by Haiti's escalating violence. Children account for more than half of all displaced people in the Caribbean nation. Generative AI could transform 25% of jobs around the world. A study from the UN's Labor Agency and Poland's National Research Institute shows the technology is more likely to result in changing job descriptions instead of widespread job losses. Women and clerical workers face the highest risk of job transformation.
Coming up.
Young people are ready to be part of this, They're already implementing transformations and changes on their communities.
UN Insider.
People aged 15 to 24 make up about 16% of the global population. That figure is expected to rise significantly by 2030. Encouraging more young people to participate in the multilateral system is a key for the UN. I sat down with the UN's Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, Philippe Pollier. Felipe, young people from across the globe recently came here to UN headquarters in New York to share their recommendations about sustainable change, science, social inclusion. Tell us more about this year's Youth Forum and what you heard.
Yes, as you mentioned, very recently we had the 13th ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is one of the largest gathering of young people in relation to the United Nations and the intergovernmental processes of the UN, with a big focus this year on sustainable development. We had more than 1,000 young leaders from different countries of the world coming here. And this year, I think it was special because in a very complex moment for multilateralism. And I think we need to be very honest that we are facing an unprecedented crisis for multilateralism. I think that the message was very important. The message coming from governments in terms of support to the UN as a platform when it's about addressing global challenges, and especially the message from young people trusting in the UN as a platform for them to be engaged with the change. I think the forum is definitely a good example of a platform for young people to be part, but it's not enough. It's really about how we continue to create continuous process for young people to be involved.
I mean, there is so much happening around the world, but we're also feeling the impacts of climate change. I mean, there's a lot of conflict everywhere you look. So when you're talking to the young people, do they believe that multilateralism is something that will help them as they continue on in their roles and in building their communities?
I strongly believe that young people are our biggest allies to reshape the new multilateral system, But this process needs multiple things to happen, And I think that at the center of this issue of participating, there's an issue in relation to trust. And I think that the real change needs to come more from an institutional perspective than really from young people. Young people are ready to be part of this, They are already implementing transformations and changes on their communities, And what they are doing, it's fully aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and our common agenda, And it's really about how then, from an institutional perspective, we create those channels for this participation to be part of the formality.
You are the first Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs, and you sort of straddle this line because you're part of the UN system, but you also are talking and engaging with young people around the world. Do you feel like their voices are being heard at the table?
I think we need to be very honest with ourselves and to recognize that we have a long way to go. I'm the youngest senior appointment in the history of the United Nations in 80 years, and I'm the only one under 45, if I'm not wrong, in the organization at certain level, While at the same time we're living in a world where half of the world's population is under 30, And we're seeing young people leading at many levels of the society, leading change in the real activity, in their day-to-day activities. And I think that the challenge we are facing internally in the UN is not only a problem of the UN. If we go, for example, to the average age of parliamentarians in the world, only 3% of parliamentarians in the world are under 30 years old, And only 1% if we're talking about young women in parliaments, So it's not only a problem of the UN. I think it's a problem of the status quo of decision making. And in terms of how to address this gap, I think it's really about creating platforms for meaningful participation.
You are also a doctor, a medical doctor, a pediatrician, in fact. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness Project?
Yes, for sure. And I think you're bringing into a conversation for me one of the most complex and emerging challenges we're facing as a global humanity. There's clear data that is showing that we're having big challenges on this matter. Suicide is the third cause of death. The COVID made a huge impact in a whole generation. Almost 25% of young people during the first year of COVID with anxiety or depression issues. And at the same time, we're seeing that the response is not being sufficient. We only have half of governments, half of countries implementing, for example, preventive approaches for mental health in schools. We know, and I've seen this with my own eyes, how the UN is in the ground working on this matter. And I think what we want to do, really championing this agenda, is first respond to a demand from young people. In every consultation in the last years, mental health is always one of the first three concerned topics by young people. We've seen that we need also to bring a holistic approach to this matter. We're talking about well-being of young people. This is a cross-cutting issue that has to do with a medical dimension, but also it's related to access to education. It's also related to the impact of social media in our lives. It's also related to the access we have to opportunities in relation to jobs, and the job market. So we are working with a strong approach on having meaningful youth participation at the center of how to bring this discussion to the highest level, but also understanding that we need to build coalitions with civil society, with the private sector, with governments, and of course with the UN.
2025 is a big year here at the United Nations, 80 years since its founding. And the theme for this anniversary is building the future together. What is the role of younger generations when you put these words together, future and together?
In this very complex scenario, marked by conflicts, and last year was the year with the highest amount of conflicts active since the Second World War. So since this organization was established. At the same time, we are facing, geopolitical tensions that definitely are affecting, the global platform that the UN represents. But as our Secretary General emphasized, the UN has never been more necessary. And I think that in these 80 years, in this 80th anniversary of the United Nations, if I have to say where we need to put the focus, is on this Pact for the Future. And we have in that pact the most, innovative approach for change, which is the inclusion of young people in the processes we held. And I think that if we are able to put this into action, then we are going to be able to continue to be what this organization was founded for, to be that common house, where in our diversity we build common goals and we make the changes for the future.
Assistant Secretary General Felipe Pulier, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Elaine.
UN Insider.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights from the region and beyond.
An estimated 1 million plant and animal species are currently under threat of extinction. About 75% of the Earth's land-based environment has been significantly altered by human actions. An estimated 66% of the marine environment has been significantly altered by humans. Thursday marked the International Day for Biodiversity. This year's theme is harmony with nature and sustainable development. One rancher in Colombia embraced the concept of working with nature and led to a major transformation.
Luis Alfonso Abril is a Colombian cowboy singing about living in harmony with nature. This song says it is man's responsibility to conserve what God gave. But for Abril, this is more than just a song. It's a way of living. Abril produces everything he eats. He proudly says the only thing he has to purchase is salt, rice, and clothing. The rest he takes from the land. This is a good thing. The farm is a 6-hour drive from the nearest town market. A decade ago, when Abril bought his finca La Esperanza, Farm of Hope, things were different. The 136 hectares of land were up for sale because the land was said to be infertile. Now it's home to 50 cows, pigs, chickens, and a wide variety of vegetables, fruits like bananas and mango, as well as carbohydrates like Colombian yuca.
Toca con la palanca, ahora sí. Eso era como si usted mirara una placa de cemento.
This soil looked like a block of cement. The grass in the rainy season did not look like this. It did not look green. But now, with this process, it is completely different. It is soft. You can walk barefoot.
Porque un suelo que hasta de a pie puede andar uno.
How did things change on this land? Sustainable cattle ranching. Abril says a cattle rancher who isn't a farmer first has no clue about nature. It all starts with healthy soil. He stopped using traditional cattle ranching practices like burning grass to fertilize the ground.
Número uno,
First, we eliminated drugs used for our cows by veterinarians. And second, we eliminated the use of burning crop residue to fertilize the ground. Zero crop burning.
Cero quemas. Porque esto, para poderlo ver, tiene que ser rápido.
Abril explains that cow manure is a host for microorganisms that help regenerate the soil. Without the traditional use of antibiotics and anti-parasitic drugs on cattle, beetles like these grow in abundance in cow dung. They oxygenate the soil. Soon the grass on his property looked different.
Alfonso says his cattle was grazing here a day ago, and it looks like a delicious salad because there's 8 different species that they could eat from on this ground for 5 days.
What also helps produce healthy forage is the quick rotation of cattle on the property. Vegetation can regrow while cattle is grazing somewhere else. This rest period allows grass to develop deeper root systems, which reduces soil erosion and increases nutrients. Experts on rotational grazing say this ultimately improves the soil's ability to retain water, and carbon is captured and restored. This helps farmers to mitigate and adapt to some climate change impacts. Abril has noticed the difference in his soil when he is reforesting. He is planting moriche palm, which grows in the region's swampy soil. Abril claims efforts to plant moriches have prospered more easily now and grow faster.
Pues el cultivo sí se sembraba en el invierno, excelente.
We would plant in winter and it was excellent. Obviously there was water.
Llegaba el verano, como era un suelo ahí, como decimos los llaneros, cascajudo.
But when it was summer, when the soil turned dry, the earth would tighten and strangle the roots.
Figura, apretaba y ahorcaba la plántula.
This farm is in Colombia's Orinoquia region, which is known as Colombia's last agricultural frontier. Large-scale rice and soy farms, African palm, and livestock are growing in number. In fact, the region is Colombia's highest producer of corn, soy, rice, and livestock.
I hope to see a dense moriche forest that will bring more birds and species so that this can become a biological corridor where the animals can take refuge and we can have the blessing of seeing them.
Dios nos dé la oportunidad de verla.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our point.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.